The possession of Job. By Let Us Pray. Chapter 1. The Fall of Job. Job was a man of wealth and prestige, a devout follower of the divine who was known throughout the land for his wisdom, charity, and unwavering faith. He was a man of great integrity, and a shining example of what it meant to live a righteous life. But despite his many blessings, Job's life was about to take a dark and unexpected turn. The first blow came suddenly, like a bolt of lightning from the sky. Job's wealth, the source of his pride and comfort, was taken from him in a single day. His flocks of sheep, his fields of crops, his herds of cattle, all gone, taken by marauders who swept down from the hills like a plague of locusts. Job was left with nothing but the clothes on his back and a broken heart. The second blow came quickly on the heels of the first. Job's 10 children, the fruit of his loins and the joy of his heart, were taken from him in a single moment. A great wind came out of nowhere and swept them away, leaving Job to mourn their loss and wonder at the cruelty of fate. The third blow was the cruelest of all. A mysterious and painful disease came upon Job, covering his skin with sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. He lay in his bed, writhing in agony, as his wife and friends looked on in horror. Job's friends came to comfort him in his hour of need, but their words only added to his pain. They told him that he must have sinned to deserve such suffering, and urged him to curse God and renounce his faith. But Job refused. He would not curse the one he loved, no matter what the cost. He would not renounce his faith, no matter how much he suffered. "I will trust in the Lord though he slay me," he cried. "I will trust in him, even unto death." And so Job lay in his bed, suffering in silence, as his faith was put to the ultimate test. The fall of Job had begun, and the journey ahead would be long and difficult. But Job was a man of unwavering devotion, and he would not give up easily. The true nature of his beliefs and the limits of his endurance would soon be revealed, as he struggled to make sense of the cruel fate that had befallen him. Chapter 2. The Conversations of Job. Job sat in his ash-covered cloak, staring out into the barren wasteland that once was his flourishing fields and pastures. His heart was heavy with grief, his mind plagued by doubt and despair. He couldn't understand why this was happening to him. He had always been a righteous man, living a life of piety and devotion to the Lord. He had been blessed with wealth, health, and a loving family, but now it was all gone. He felt as though he had been struck down by a cruel and unjust fate. As he sat there, surrounded by his friends, he felt a strange comfort in their presence. They had come to offer their condolences and comfort, but also to offer their own perspectives on his suffering. "Job, my friend," one of them said, placing a hand on his shoulder, "you have been struck down by God's wrath. Your wealth and children were taken from you because of your wickedness. Curse God and die." Job shook his head, his eyes filled with tears. "I will not curse the Lord, for he has given and he has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Another friend spoke up. "Job, you have been foolish in your devotion. You have put all your faith in a cruel and capricious deity. Renounce your beliefs and turn to the gods that will bring you prosperity and happiness." Job looked at him with sadness in his eyes. "How can I renounce the Lord when I know in my heart that he is just and good? I may not understand his ways, but I trust in his wisdom and mercy." The conversations with his friends continued, each one offering their own opinions and beliefs. But through it all, Job remained steadfast in his faith, even as his suffering continued to mount. But the conversations that impacted Job the most were the ones he had with God. He cried out to the Lord, asking why he had forsaken him. He demanded an explanation for his suffering, and in his quiet moments, he listened for a response. And in the stillness of his heart, he heard a voice that spoke to him of the mysteries of the divine and the purpose of his suffering. Through his conversations with God, Job came to understand that his suffering was not a punishment for his wickedness, but a test of his faith. And as he meditated on the Lord's words, he felt a strange peace settle over him. Though his body was racked with pain and his soul was heavy with grief, he knew that he was not alone. He knew that the Lord was with him, and that his faith was strong enough to endure. And as the sun set on that desolate wasteland, Job sat surrounded by his friends, his heart filled with hope and his soul strengthened by his faith. He knew that his journey was far from over, but he was no longer afraid. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, for he was a man of unwavering faith, and he knew that the Lord would never forsake him. Chapter 3: The Temptation of Satan. The sun had set on the land of Canaan, casting a warm glow over the hills and fields. In the distance, the faint sound of a flute could be heard, carried on the breeze. But in the darkness of Job's home, there was no peace. The wealthy and devout man lay on his bed, writhing in pain from the mysterious disease that had befallen him. Suddenly, a voice spoke from the shadows. "Job, servant of God," the voice said, "do you still hold fast to your faith?" Job struggled to sit up, peering into the darkness. A figure emerged, a being of unearthly beauty and power. It was Satan, a powerful and cunning demon, and he was determined to destroy Job's reputation, his wealth, and ultimately, his soul. "Who are you?" Job asked, his voice trembling with fear. "I am the tempter, the accuser," Satan replied with a sly smile. "I am here to prove that your faith is nothing more than a facade. That it is your wealth and blessings, not your devotion to God, that have made you great." Job's heart sank. He had always known that his blessings were a gift from God, and he had never taken them for granted. He had always held fast to his faith, no matter what life had thrown at him. But now, he was being tested like never before. Satan stepped closer, his eyes blazing with a fierce light. "Do you still believe that God loves you, Job?" he asked. "That he will protect you, no matter what?" "Yes," Job replied, his voice firm and resolute. Satan chuckled, a sound like the rustling of dead leaves. "We shall see," he said. "I offer you a deal, Job. Renounce your faith, curse God, and I will give you back your wealth and your children. You will live in luxury, never having to suffer again." Job shook his head. "I will not renounce my faith," he said. "I will not curse God. I know that He is just and merciful, and that He has a plan for me." Satan's smile faded, replaced by a look of anger. "You are a foolish man, Job," he said. "You will regret your refusal." And with that, he disappeared into the night, leaving Job alone with his pain and his fears. The temptation of Satan had begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. Would Job hold fast to his faith, no matter what? Or would he be tempted to renounce his beliefs and curse God? The answer would determine not only his future, but the fate of his soul. Chapter 4: The Trial of Job. The winds of misfortune continued to howl, battering Job's soul with each gust. Every moment felt like a living hell, and every breath was a struggle. He had never felt so alone, so isolated, so forgotten by the very deity he had devoted his life to serving. As the days passed, Job's suffering intensified. The sores that covered his skin festered and grew, consuming his body with pain. His friends and family abandoned him, unable to bear the sight of his torment. And his mind was plagued by thoughts of doubt and despair, tempting him to curse the very God he had once worshipped so devoutly. In the depths of his agony, Job cried out to God, demanding an explanation for his suffering. He could feel the weight of his faith slipping away, the foundation of his beliefs crumbling beneath him. It was then that Satan appeared before him, taunting him with whispers of betrayal and deceit. "Why do you still cling to your faith, Job?" Satan sneered. "Do you not see that your God has abandoned you? That He has cast you aside like a worthless scrap of flesh?" "I will not renounce my faith," Job replied, his voice filled with defiance. "I will not curse the name of the Lord, no matter how great my suffering may be." Satan's laughter echoed through the emptiness of Job's world, each cackle a sharpened blade that cut into his soul. "You are a fool, Job," the demon said. "A pitiful, misguided fool. Your faith is nothing but a facade, a fragile veil that will soon be shattered." With each passing moment, Job's resolve was tested, his belief in God and himself wavering. He had always known that faith was a journey, a constant struggle to understand and accept the will of the divine. But he had never imagined that his journey would lead him to such a dark and desolate place. As the storm of his suffering raged on, Job was forced to confront the true nature of his beliefs and the limits of his endurance. He was being tested, his faith tried like never before. And yet, in the midst of his torment, he held on to the one thing that gave him hope, the belief that there was still a purpose to his suffering, that there was still a reason for him to endure. The trial of Job had begun, and it would be a test unlike any other. But he was determined to emerge from it victorious, his faith unbroken, his soul triumphant. Chapter 5: The Revelation of Job. The winds of change blew through the scorched land of Canaan, as Job approached the throne of God. The once proud and wealthy man was now a shadow of his former self, his body racked with pain, his soul consumed by doubt. But despite his suffering, Job remained steadfast in his faith. "Why have you forsaken me?" Job cried out, his voice echoing through the emptiness of the sky. "Why have you allowed this to happen?" There was a long silence, as the winds died down and the clouds gathered above. And then, a voice spoke, a voice that was like thunder and lightning, a voice that shook the very foundations of the earth. "Who are you, that you should question my ways?" the voice boomed. "Do you not know that I am the Lord, the Creator of heaven and earth? Do you not understand that I am the source of all life and all wisdom?" Job was stunned, and he fell to his knees, his face buried in the sand. He had never felt so small or so unworthy. And yet, he still had one final question, one that had haunted him for years. "Why have you allowed me to suffer?" Job asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Because I have faith in you," the voice replied. "Faith that you will endure, faith that you will remain steadfast, even in the face of adversity. I have faith that you will understand the true meaning of your suffering, and that you will emerge from it stronger and more wise." And with that, the voice faded away, leaving Job alone in the desert. But he was no longer the same man he had been before. He had seen the face of God, and he had understood the true meaning of his suffering. He had learned that suffering was not a punishment, but a test of faith, a test of endurance, a test of wisdom. Job rose to his feet, his eyes filled with tears. He had been given a gift of insight and understanding. He would never forget this moment, this revelation that had changed his life forever. And he would carry this knowledge with him, as he returned to his family and friends, as he regained his wealth and prosperity, as he continued to serve the Lord with all his heart, all his soul, and all his strength. Chapter 6: The Restoration of Job. Job sat quietly in his home, his eyes closed in peaceful contemplation. He had been through a trial unlike any other, a test of his faith that had pushed him to the brink of despair. But through it all, he had never wavered. He had never cursed God or renounced his beliefs. And now, at long last, his reward had come. He opened his eyes and looked around his home, his heart overflowing with gratitude. The walls were once again adorned with tapestries and fine furnishings, and the rooms were filled with the laughter of his children. His wealth had been restored, and his reputation was once again unblemished. Job stood up, feeling a deep sense of peace and contentment. He walked outside, basking in the warmth of the sun and the beauty of the world around him. He was surrounded by his friends and family, all of whom had been restored to him. They were all here, together, just as they had been before his suffering had begun. And yet, Job was different now. He was stronger, wiser, and more steadfast in his faith. He had been through a crucible, a test of his soul that had revealed to him the true nature of the divine. He had seen the wisdom and power of God, and he had accepted the will of the Almighty with open arms. As he looked out over the lush green fields and rolling hills, Job felt a deep sense of gratitude and wonder. He knew that he had been blessed, that he had been given a gift unlike any other. He had been given the gift of faith, the gift of understanding, and the gift of hope. And with that knowledge, Job was at peace. He was at peace with himself, with his family, and with God. He knew that his trial was over, that his suffering was behind him, and that his future was bright and full of promise. He had faced his greatest fears and come out on the other side, and he was ready to embrace the world with open arms. The restoration of Job was a triumph of the human spirit, a testament to the power of faith and the resilience of the human soul. He was a beacon of hope, a shining example of what it means to be truly faithful, and he would be remembered for generations to come as a man who had faced his greatest challenges and emerged victorious.